Welcome to week 14. Our reading in Jones, Farnham, and Saxon has to do with environmental questions, and so I'm going to lecture just two little lectures this week on what I'm calling environmental theologies. How should we see nature? And I'm going to bring these views of theology from a religious perspective with three different Christian views of nature, and then one explicitly non-Christian view of nature. But before we talk about that, I want to talk about some background concepts, and that is the contrast between persons and non-persons. Sometimes in science fiction, we run into artifacts, beings, that push the boundaries here. There was the second version of Star Trek back in the 1980s, Star Trek: The Next Generation. Maybe many students still are familiar with this character. The character of Data, who serves on the spaceship. Data is an android, and Data spends a lot of time hanging out with Geordi, who is a human being. And Data and Geordi have many adventures together, and they seem to be friends. So I used to use them as an example in class. And then I would ask the students, are Data and Geordi really friends? Because Data is an android. Can an android be a person? Science fiction explores the difference between persons and non-persons. And there are many other science fiction stories, many of them in nice movies, that you could explore this topic. It's important because we have duties, moral responsibilities to persons, but not to machines. I've often urged this as an experiment for some computer scientists, that you should sneak into your room when your roommate is not there and reprogram your roommate's computer so that the next time your roommate goes over to shut it off and he or she pushes the off button, the computer will say, "Oh, please, that hurts so bad. Don't do it to me." Obviously, it would just be a programming thing, and I think computer programs would find it easy to actually hack into their friend's computer and do it, and you could really cause a moment of surprise and consternation for your roommate. But it would be a joke, because the computer is just a thing. Now, if you broke your roommate's computer, that would be wrong, but not because you're hurting the computer. The computer is an instrument, and it belongs to somebody else. When you damage somebody else's property, that's bad because it belongs to somebody else. So we have the distinction between instrumental and intrinsic value. Your roommate's computer has instrumental value, but your roommate has intrinsic value. A computer robot in a science fiction story puts that question really closely to us. Is the robot just a machine, or is it a person with intrinsic value? Now, for the rest of this lecture, I'm not going to concern myself with robots or computers. But I'm going to concern our thinking, or turn our thinking toward nature. Nature also has instrumental value. It's useful to us. Does it also have intrinsic value the way a person does? What place does the non-human world have in our morality? Okay, now I'm going to go through different theologies. The first one is called dominion theology, and the basic idea here is that human beings rule over the earth. In Genesis 1, verses 26 and 28, God creates man in God's image, and God gives them dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, everything walks around on the earth. He tells the people to increase and multiply and rule over the earth. Now, in a dominion view, then, God gives the creation to human beings. it's ours. And it has instrumental value to us. We like the fish because we eat them, or we like the mountains because they are beautiful. We like the land because we can grow things. It is useful to us. And in dominion theology, nature is regarded as an it, a thing. So it has instrumental value. It's kind of like your neighbor's computer or your neighbor's car or your neighbor's hammer. Anything that belongs to your neighbor has instrumental value only, but it belongs to your neighbor. But nature doesn't belongs to us. It belongs we together have dominion over it. We can do what we want with it if it serves us. Now, here are three more points that go along with dominion theology, but actually will be shared by the other versions of theology that I will come to. Nature serves as a training ground for virtue and vice. Thomas Aquinas muses about the question, should a man beat his ox? Should a man mistreat his animal? And the answer is no. Because if you mistreat your animal, you'll get into the habit of mistreating or beating, and then you might, because you've developed this vicious habit in yourself, you would be more likely to beat a human being. And that would be because human beings are intrinsically valuable. So nature is useful as a training ground for virtue and vice. Another point, and this was spoken or stated in the work of a theologian, Gerhard von Rott, goes back to Israel, ancient Israel, and its remarkable difference from the other countries around it, all the other cultures around Israel. And that is because Israel was monotheistic. In von Rott's words, they demythologized the world. In the cultures around Israel, everything was full of gods, as one philosopher put it. And the different religions did this in different ways. But you would have nature religions where there is a goddess of the stream and a goddess of the field and a god of the ocean and a god of the mountain. Little gods for little things like a tree or a copse of trees, but a bigger god for bigger things. And of course, the great gods are gods of the oceans and the storms and whatnot. But everything is spiritual. Everything is full of gods. If your crop did badly this year, it's probably because you didn't sacrifice right to the right god or goddess of the crops. Into this world comes Israel with its monotheistic religion. There's only one God, and he rules over everything. So from Israel's perspective, if there's a bad crop, well, it's Yahweh's fault. No, that's not the way to put it. God has decreed that this happen. Perhaps for some judgmental reason, he's judging us for our sins, or he's punishing this person, but certainly God has allowed it. God makes the world, God rules over the world and gives the world to us. Now, centuries later, something grows out of this worldview. And this is the fifth point. Since God has made us in his image and has put us in a world that he has designed, human beings can, in the words of many Christian scientists and others, we can think God's thoughts after him. When Galileo discovers things about gravity, or when Newton makes laws of gravity, when Kepler figures out the orbits of the planets, they're not producing something new and wonderful. To human beings it's new and wonderful, but it has been there the whole time. God's truth is already there in the world, and people discover it. helps explain something that's seemingly odd in the history of science. Why did science, what we call modern science, emerge in Europe? If you go back from our time, 1,300 years, you find Europe in what we call the Dark Ages, a time of ignorance and warfare and a great loss of material culture. And in China, at the same time, you have a brilliant leading culture that was way ahead in terms of technology and understanding of the world, was far, far ahead. The Chinese civilization was dwarfed European civilization. Why did science come about in the West and then spread around the world? Many historians, now we can oversimplify this, but many historians of science would point right here. This view of God that the Western culture has inherited from Judaism, that there is a single God that has created the world and created us so that we can understand the world, is the seedbed of Western science. Now, that's an interesting explanation for a historical question, and it's certainly part of the implications of this theology of nature. Okay, on dominion theology. Should we protect the environment? The answer is yes, just to the extent that it's good for us. So let's have a particular example that we can refer to as we go through. Should we tear down dams on the Snake River to promote salmon? Well, you know how the debate has gone for many decades, well, a couple decades now, and it's still going on. We should take down the dams because salmon will be endangered and go extinct. And we like salmon. We should not take down the dams because we get electricity and flood control from them. And the debate goes on, doesn't it? It's good for us this way. It's good for us this way. It's good for us. No. So back for a dominion theologian, that's the nature of the debate. Is it good for us or not? We want to compare this with some other views in the next lecture.